Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. Jamie Fowler joining me from somewhere in lovely England, as I can guess. Jamie, one of the things I don't like on a podcast is when somebody starts off with a really uncomfortable question that sort of puts the guest totally off at ease. So I want to know, where do you get off interviewing my idol, Teri McKeever, before I can do that? Was that a personal attack on me, or you're just going to pretend you didn't know?
No, so I wasn't aware. I think when I first started out doing the podcast, it was just like what I was trying to do was, because I just graduated from university. I think you guys call it college. Just graduated from university, and I was kind of in between. I didn't have a full-time coaching position. I was in a part-time coaching position. And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of my spare time to travel around the UK and visit as many clubs as I can and have conversations with coaches. And what I'll do is I'll record these conversations, and maybe I'll share them with people. If they like it, they like it. And I was thinking, I'll be happy if maybe 5 people listen to it. My mum, my dad, my family, and then maybe a couple of my colleagues at the club I was coaching at the time. If those 5 people listen to it, then I've done all right. But then literally, I think I've recorded 4 or 5 episodes, and then we went into lockdown with COVID. So I was like, okay, so now I've just got to record over Zoom, and ended up just being able to record with people all over the world. So in terms of how I managed to get Teri McKeever on the podcast is I actually just reached out to her via email. You can find her email on the Cow website. Just reached out to her and she said, I'd love to come on your podcast, but you have to kind of go through the university communications director to book me up. So then I had to go around the long way. But no, yeah, I probably each month I probably send about 12 emails of requesting people to come on the podcast, fully aware that some of them either are too busy, don't really want to speak on a podcast, maybe won't even see the email. And, I'm happy if I get 2 or 3 people return to that and say, yeah, I'll come on your podcast. So I think on that batch of emails, I sent emails out to Teri McKeever, to Dave Durden, to Greg Troy, to Eddie Reese. I think I sent 4 on that day, and I managed to get Eddie and Teri, and I was like, well, this is a good return.
Yeah, so I want to work backwards a little bit. Yeah, that is an incredible return. I mean, you got 2 coaching legends here in the last several weeks, so you're on fire. As you said, you are a coach yourself. In doing my research prior to the podcast, you just started a new job. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'm now the head coach of the club in my hometown. So kind of moved back home from where I was at university, of a town called Luton in the UK. It's just north of London, about 30 miles north of London.
It's home to a London airport, right? Like one of the
London Luton Airport.
6 named London airports.
Yeah, about 3 of them aren't in London.
Right.
But, it's home to the airport. So I've literally, I think I started my job in February, and I haven't done any coaching yet. So this is a really strange situation of, the last session I coached was at my old club. I think it was end of December, like New Year's Eve or something like that. We coached. So I've not coached this year yet.
Yeah,
so
New Year's Eve 2020. Yeah. And it's been so 3 months. Wow. Yeah, I mean it's crazy times in the swimming world. And prior to that, so if we just sort of go a little bit backwards in your biography, you said you were coaching where you were attending university. Was this you were in Birmingham? Is that?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I was an assistant coach, so I was I was actually like number three. So there was a head coach, then there was assistant head coach, and then there was me. And we were the only three coaches really in the program. And I was coaching the two squads at the younger end of that club, kind of from age 9 through to about age 13. So real kind of those formative years. I think they're the best age group to coach. I think it's just so fun. Your sessions it's just so fast paced. The sessions, like you go from one thing to the next. It's great. But I was, really privileged to coach there at that program. I think they've, some fantastic coaches, but also we had I think it was a real bonus of being able to having such great relationships, because in Birmingham's for us, it's quite a big city.
Yeah, it's a big
in
city.
America, it's not so big for an American city, but we were kind of the headline club for the city, I guess, in terms of it was the city of Birmingham, so it was like the city's name is in our club. But we worked with a lot of the other local clubs as well, and they kind of fed us some really great swimmers at all different ages. So we got to work with the best swimmers in the area. So that was, for me, it was really good for my development. I was in and around Birmingham for about 4.5 years because I was doing my degree, and then I stayed on for a little bit afterwards. So quite a big chapter of my career.
And I have a question about that. You talk about the clubs feeding in. I'm just like curious, sometimes we have that situation in American swim clubs, but it's not explicit. And I would say the clubs that are feeding are probably not thrilled with that arrangement. I know when I coached in Denmark as well, and in Denmark, there was often discussions about getting something going like that, because certain clubs were better equipped sort of to provide for senior swimmers. So is that an explicit arrangement, or is it just sort of like the club you coached at, that's the biggest club, and people feel like when they get to a certain level, they should just go there?
So I wasn't around when that first started to happen. So I don't know kind of the ins and outs of it. I can only speak from, my experience of, working within that. And, a large part of my job was going out and visiting those clubs. Yeah. And, helping them run sessions every now and again. And then we'd put on training sessions, and we'd invite those clubs to training sessions. So I guess it was
seems cooperative.
Yeah, quite. And I always thought it worked both ways, right? Because we tried to reach out to those clubs and to help those clubs where we could. But also when they, sent those swimmers to us, they would always remain members of that club. So when, we didn't enter we call it junior league, and we have national league as well. So we didn't enter those. We let the swimmers that worked with us swim for their home clubs with that. So we like to think it was kind of a two-way thing where everyone seems to benefit.
Yeah, actually seems like a pretty good system, so that, because I think, some people would say it's all about egos, but also if you're a coach, wherever you're coaching, you want to, you're going to get some recognition based on the swimmers. And I think one of the things that can happen in situations like that is whoever was a developmental coach can sort of just get excised from a swimmer's history. So to preserve that sort of connection to the club that a kid may have grown up swimming on, and essentially what you're providing is a training environment. I think that sounds pretty great, actually. All right, so let's get to the podcast, because I have a lot of questions about it. I was just listening before we recorded here. I was catching up, giving another listen to the Eddie Reese podcast. To talk about the process, you said you had to go through the communications department. What was the process like to get Eddie Reese on a podcast? Because I imagine he's not like, oh yeah, I'll just meet you on Zoom. And you referenced some technical difficulties on the front end.
This is a great story, actually. So one of the coaches from Birmingham a few years back, he went to Texas and I think he visited Nitro.
Okay.
Not Nitro?
Yeah, Nitro is in the Austin, Texas area. It's the same town as University of Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he visited Nitro, and he also visited Eddie Reese's program. He might have visited. Is Dynamo a club there as well?
Dynamo would be in Atlanta, Georgia.
No, I don't think he went there then.
Yeah.
Maybe I've just seen Dynamo stuff on Twitter. I'm not sure. He went to Nitro and I think he visited Eddie's program.
Yep.
So then I said, I'd really like to, years later, I said, I'd really like to speak to Eddie Reese. And he said, I can try and put you in touch with him. So he gave me he emailed Eddie and said, Eddie, my friend wants to set up a podcast with you. Is that okay? And Eddie said, yeah, it's fine. Give him my email address. So Chris, if Chris is listening, big shout out to Chris, great friend and great colleague, gave me his email address. And this was it would have been 2019, gave me his email address in 2019, right? So I emailed Eddie Reese. I didn't I've seen Chris's thread and Eddie said, yeah, sure, I'm up for it.
Sure.
So I emailed Eddie and I didn't get a reply. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's just busy or maybe it's gone into his junk folder or whatever. So then I left it, and then it was autumn 2020. I emailed him again. And
so 12 months later.
12 months later, I emailed him again. I didn't reference my previous email that maybe went unread. And he just came straight back with, yeah, let's set something up. More than happy to help. Because it was around kind of Thanksgiving. We don't do Thanksgiving here, so I actually don't know when it is. It's sometime in November, right? But
it's the fourth Thursday of November every year.
Okay, right, yeah. So he said, yeah, just sometime after Thanksgiving. So I had to then go and Google when is Thanksgiving. I said, yeah, okay, let's set something up. And I think he was actually at a meet kind of the weekend we set something up. Yep. And I think we had a Zoom call set up and either I logged into the wrong Zoom call or when I sent Eddie the link, there was a letter missing on the link and that call didn't happen, right? So the next night I get back from training and I used to cycle to and from the pool. So I was just locking my bike up at my apartment and my phone was ringing and I saw the number was because my phone tells me where it's calling from.
Sure.
It was Austin, Texas. And I was like, if I pick this up, I'm just going to get charged a huge bill from my telephone provider.
Yeah, exactly.
So I didn't answer and he left me a message. And honestly, it was just it was such a funny message from Eddie. I think people always underestimate how much of a funny guy he is.
Yeah.
He said, hi, it's Eddie Reese from Texas. Not sure if you know who I am. And I was like, come on, Eddie, let's be real here.
Right.
And he said, I think I just missed you on the call. Let's set up another Zoom invite. I'm at a meet this next few days. Don't call me back. I've just realized you're in the UK, so don't call me back. But we'll link up on Zoom. So then the next week we got it sorted. So yeah, that was a great kind of experience because I felt like I got to know Eddie before because we had these kind of we played missed call tennis a few times, which was good fun.
Yeah. and what I'm really curious to hear what some of your big takeaways from because you're interviewing. I mean, you're interviewing all these heavy hitters. And I know what I think about the Eddie Reese podcast or the Teri podcast, but what were some of your big takeaways from that podcast with Eddie? What was some of the stuff that you left going oh, wow.
I think the first thing is that first of all, goes for all the people I've interviewed. When I first started out doing the podcast, I was always like, oh, I'll never be able to speak to people like Eddie Reese or Teri McKeever.
Right.
Because just like, they just don't have time for someone like me. So I think the first thing is like, in coaching, really everyone's kind of in coaching for the same reasons. Everyone just wants to share knowledge, either that's with other coaches or athletes. So don't be afraid to ask coaches for like a conversation, because more often than not, they'll say yes. You've just got to fit it in the crazy schedule. Second thing with Eddie is, I think it was actually the subtitle for the episode is, if it doesn't work, don't do it. And what I loved about Eddie is he's actually quite no nonsense. Yeah. It's like, if it works, we'll do it. If it doesn't work, then let's just not bother with it. Right. So I think, like, because he says he likes to change something every year within his program. Mm-hmm. And there are some things that he might change one year. It doesn't work. He won't do it again, or he might try it a few years later just to test it out again. But like, if it doesn't work, don't make a habit of doing it, because there's a reason why it doesn't work. So yeah, those would probably be the two things for me. If it doesn't work, don't do it. But also don't be afraid to ask coaches for things, because, you know, as I found out, 38 of them have said yes so far. So
yeah. I think what was great, I think you captured something about Eddie that, you know, here you have this person who's accomplished so much coaching wise. And I thought this was actually true for the Teri podcast as well, is like, they're saying stuff and you go like, it's so simple, right? They make it sound so simple, but you realize like, okay, it in a way it is simple, but these people have mastered communicating this. You know, they've got it down to, like you say, no nonsense. They've got it down to where they can directly communicate these very important but yet simple things to people about what it is they need to do to get better, right?
Yeah, that's another thing, right? I think, and this is not actually really from the podcast I recorded with Eddie. Sometimes I just go on YouTube and I'll just search like Eddie Reese, and there's like a load of videos of him, sure, like some videos of him at press conferences at NC2As, that kind of stuff, but also just videos of him talking, right? This kind of helps me plan my episodes as well. But I've always thought Eddie Reese explains adaptation really, really well. Like, okay, I've got a degree in sports science, right? And the way the lecturers explain adaptation to you there versus how I wish Eddie Reese was my lecturer at university, right? Because he just explained it so easily.
Yeah.
Like, I think there'll be a video. I'll find it. I'll link you and you can put it in the show notes. Like, he just on his whiteboard draws a cell and says, and if you throw all of this stuff at the cell over 6 weeks, it's going to get used to that, and it's going to, you know, stop getting damaged by it, because it's going to, you know, get smarter and build itself a little bit stronger. Yeah. So in 6 weeks' time, don't throw the same stuff at the cell, because it's not going to damage it. You need to then increase what you're doing. And it's just I just thought it just struck a real good note with me in terms of, okay, so we've got to progress things every 6 to 8 weeks. And that's another big thing Eddie believes, is that your swimmers change, like properly change, every 6 months, I think he said. Like, you will have a completely new swimmer every 6 months if you coach them properly. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so my master's degree is in positive psychology. And I thought, listening to the Eddie podcast, there were like 3 or 4 instances where I go, Eddie doesn't know it, but he's actually like a master of positive psychology. You know, like, he probably doesn't think of it as such, but he's got all these processes in. When he was describing the fact that, like, he doesn't think it's a swimmer's jobs to, you know, call each other out while they're in the midst of practice. You know, that's a coach's job. Their job is to be positive with each other. And like, because their positivity actually has, like, from their peers, has more impact than the coach. And like, yes, yes, yes. And then the fact that they have that team meeting where, they share something. One of the things I try to get swimmers to do is to sit down and like do a journaling exercise, a very popular journaling exercise in positive psychology that's just like what went well, since you sit down and write what went well on any given day. But even better is if you get people in a meeting talking out loud and sharing with each other and like get like sort of like a brainstorm generative process. And, of course he gives credit to Nate Dusing for it. But I think it's just wonderful that he has something like that in his program.
I think like, don't forget, like, he credited Nate for that. Nate started it.
Yeah.
But I think it would be very easy for it to kind of die out.
Yeah.
After successive years of different people graduating and moving away from the program. I think Eddie recognizing that it's a really useful part of the week is what's kept it going. So someone else might have brought it in, but Eddie recognized the importance of it in terms of the mindset and what it gives. So I reckon Eddie's tried to encourage it. And maybe he says to the seniors every year, he says, okay, now it falls on you to run the weekly clap. I think, was it the clap meeting or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know, but maybe he encourages, or at the start, maybe he encouraged the seniors every year to kind of take it on. And now maybe it's got to a point where he doesn't need to encourage it, because now the seniors from the year before might say to I don't know what the next one down is. Says,
juniors.
Okay. Yeah. Juniors. Now it's your turn to run these meetings. I don't know that for sure, but I guess that might have been how it evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what you said in the beginning as the big takeaway is like, again, this is a positive psychology thing, is a lot of positive psychology is built around not just sort of like correcting what's wrong, but realizing what is right. And you got to hold on to that stuff. Because if you're in a change process, right? If you're every 6 weeks, you're changing the stimuli to get the cell to adapt. Every 6 months, you have a new swimmer and you're changing the way you coach them. But if you have stuff that works and you don't even know it works, you might be throwing away. Like if you didn't know, if you don't have a coach, like Nate Dusing starts that, but if you don't have a coach that knows like, hey, this is really working, this is good for the guys on my team, we need to do this forever, basically. Yeah. If you don't recognize that, you could just be like change, and throw out the best parts of your program. So I think it really speaks to, that coaching art, that he can identify what stuff, as you say, what stuff works and what stuff doesn't. I want to switch bases because I was really interested. You said, you're prepped for the podcast. Sometimes you get on YouTube, you start watching videos for people. What else do you do to prepare to talk to somebody on a podcast?
If I'm honest, like swimming is not like, if I wanted to find out, we call it football, you call it soccer, about a football manager, and I just search their name on Google, right, you just find so much information about them. Swimming, especially in the UK, I know is just not as it's not as professional, right? So some coaches like Eddie, Teri, Dave Marsh, some of those big names, you can get a good page on Wikipedia about them, right? And then you can try and like find the sources and then go through it that way. I always find as well, especially the college coaches, on the college team website is always a good bio and you can kind of go through. So yeah, YouTube, Wikipedia, but I always go through the sources. I don't just read it off the Wikipedia site. And then obviously if they've got a club and they go to the club website, there's a nice little bio there. But also, I have like a couple of coaches and colleagues that I'm like quite close with and quite friendly with. I always say like, hey, I'm talking to Teri next week. What do you think might be good to ask Teri? Or what do you think would be good to ask Eddie? And they'll throw a couple of ideas in. Some of them I'll already have on the plan. Some of them I think, that's a great idea. So I'll work that in. So yeah, to be honest, like I love recording the episodes, planning them, is a bit of a chore because that is.
I'm with you 100%.
The planning is the worst. Right? Yeah. I'm aware that as much as at the end of the episode when I say, "Oh, Eddie will keep in touch" or "Teri will keep in touch," I probably realistically am not going to be speaking to them on a real regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to, in that kind of 40, 50 minutes that I'm speaking to them, I want to try and learn as much as I can so that, yeah, it's an efficient resource for people.
Right. Okay. I want to ask you some questions about when you interviewed my idol, Teri McKeever. Because I was always like, I thought it was like, I don't know, it might be the best swimming podcast I ever listened to. Cause like here on Jersey Wahoo's the team I coach. Well, because you got like an entire clinic's worth of really valuable information out of her in like 40 minutes. I mean, if you just the time Teri was talking, I think it was a 45-minute podcast. She was probably talking for 40 minutes of it. And like, it was just like gold for me, like every single, like when she was describing why swimmers should swim events other than whatever their primary race is. Here on Jersey Wahoo's, the club I coach at, we time-stamped that and we sent it out to our entire team. Like this. You learn this. But I'm curious, like what were enough of my gushing, like what were some of your big takeaways talking to Teri?
I think, and this is something that one of my friends said as well, is that for 40 minutes, Teri's really nice. Like she just sounds so lovely.
Yeah.
Like a really caring coach.
Yeah.
And in the last 5 minutes, it's like, yeah, but also I plan for the most ambitious goal. And if you don't want to come on that journey with us, then you don't swim in my program.
Yeah.
So I just like that. And it's like, that's great coaching though. That's what coaching is. It's knowing who needs to be looked after and who needs to be critiqued at the right time, who needs to be pushed, who needs to be, cared for at the right time. And I think Teri is excellent at that. I only spoke to her for about an hour, but I just got the impression of when you're not having a great time and you're in a bit of a pit where you're swimming, Teri will bring you out of it.
Right.
And at the same time, if you're not pulling your weight, Teri will tell you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was the best bit for me, is that for me, that's coaching, right? In the town where I'm from, we have a football team, a soccer team.
You could call it football on this podcast. It's okay. We're an international podcast, Jamie.
To all the listeners, when I say football, I mean the one that you actually kick, not the one that you throw. Okay. And we had a manager a few years ago, a coach a few years ago, and in the press he was always saying, never too high, never too low. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's, for me as a coach, it's so important, right? And I think people like Eddie, people like Teri are just like that. When your athlete, when your swimmer is having a real tough time, you're picking them up. And when they're up in the air at the highest of highs, you're tapping them on the feet, just letting them know that you're still there. Like our job as a coach is just to be that constant. Yeah. So that, and I think Teri does that really well, from what I gathered.
Yeah, I love that story that she told about, the swimmer who had a disciplinary issue and came back to practice and was kind of moping their way through practice. I thought that was another one of those last 5 minute stories where you see the turn from somebody who can be so tender with their athletes and then just flip to like, hey, listen, I don't want to watch you mope around at this practice anymore. You can either get your head in the game or get out of here, But
I also think like that was again great. I think that was great psychological coaching, right? Because there was a discipline issue, and I think they're suspended from the team, and there was disciplinary action.
Right.
Once that's finished, in Teri's mind, that's over with. Right. So I think that situation there was literally Teri saying, whatever's happened, that's not what's happening now. We're here now and I'm coaching you. So let's do this.
Right.
I think that was enough. Yeah. Like you say, another great kind of example of she's dealt with the issue and now let's get better. Yeah.
I've realized that that's something I've been working really hard on as a coach this year. I think that I was not confrontational enough. I've become more confrontational, and I realized it was my own lack of comfort in that, like, of course I got into coaching because I like swimmers. I like helping people get better. I value the relationships with the athletes. And sometimes I think I thought that if I was, that if I was too strict, like on disciplinary stuff, that basically I would ruin the relationship with the swimmers. But what I've realized is that you can do that move, that Teri, you can come in, you can handle it. And then the next day just go like, all right, moving on. Like, see you, here we go. And it's all right. It's not, you haven't blown up, and people actually, in some ways they expect it from you as a coach, and it can make your relationship better if you do something like that.
I think it goes back to being like no nonsense. Like just nip it in the bud, sort the issue out when it's there, because ultimately we're all here to do a job and to get better. And if this issue lingers on, it's going to get in the way of what the primary goal is, right? So let's sort it out and move on. And I think that's what it's about, right?
Yeah. So I want to turn now to a podcast I actually haven't listened to, but I just scanning back across your work. I can see you had Brent Rushall on.
It's a long one. It's like an hour and a half, I think, and it was cut down from about 2 hours.
Oh my gosh!
He talks, and he is really just a fountain of words.
Yes.
So yeah, and do you know what? I was really looking forward to recording that episode, right? Because personally, USRPT is not something that, I'm skeptical of it as a whole model, right?
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you, because you've had a bunch of USRPT people on. Like, I didn't know, like, is Jamie personally like, a big is he in the USRPT religion? I'm a former member of the religion. So, I got to like figure out where you're at.
I'm, no, it's not for me.
It's not for you. So you wouldn't say you're a skeptic, but you have some questions about it.
Yeah, I have questions. So I had a Northern Irish guy on the podcast last May, I think, and he uses USRPT. So, and then obviously I just read a few articles about it that Brent had written, that other people had written, pros and cons, and I just really tried to get my head around it. I spoke to a few coaches that I know about it. I was like, what do you really think? And we had a bit of a discussion about it. So then I wrote a blog post on it that's on our website, and it was just kind of pros and cons, and this really kind of goes back to everything on the Poolside Pass website, the podcast, the blogs, is more there to help coaches form their own opinions.
Right.
Rather than to tell you USRPT is rubbish or USRPT is the best thing since sliced bread or whatever. Yeah. Like for me, there are some pros to it. Yeah. There are definitely some pros to it, but I feel like, Brent said it in the podcast. Brent said, if you're not doing all of these things, you're not doing USRPT.
Yeah.
So, and I think for me, when a model is inflexible, I've got questions, because clearly some things that are outside of the model work really well.
Right.
So I want to try and take bits from lots of different models and mash them together into a Jamie model that works for me and for my swimmers. So
that
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that inflexibility, I do think like, and I tried it. I tried like following it to the letter I did it for like a period of 3 months. And yes, there were some strengths and some big strengths, and there were some huge weaknesses to it. Like, like just glaring kind of stuff. And I've often said in other contexts, I think it's probably perfect. And I'm borrowing this from somebody much wiser than me, Milton Elms, who told me this, but I repeat, I like to get things from Milt and then just repeat them to make myself sound smarter. So he said, Chris, it's perfect training on paper. It's perfect on paper. But I even think, as I listen to Brent say, if you're not doing you're not doing it, it's impossible to get somebody to do it the right way. Like it's impossible to get human beings to actually do it as it's written on paper.
So this morning I listened to, I think it was the previous podcast to this that wasn't with the one it was kind of just a solo one that you did.
The one I did about my training. Yeah. Like,
and at the end it was like, on next is Jamie Fowler.
Yeah.
I was like, it's me. So right. That was, you mentioned USRPT in there, right?
Yeah.
And you said if it's not done properly, then you get people that are really good at the 50 and the 100.
Yeah.
But they're not very good at the 200 and the 400. And I know definitely in the UK, a lot of coaches think if you do USRPT, you run a sprint program.
Right.
Right. And when you actually read about USRPT, it's not a sprint program. It's meant to be that you can use it for people on the 400, on the 200, the 100, the 50, you're meant to be able to use it across the range of events. For sure. And I think the reason some people believe it's a sprint program is partly because pretty much all you do in training is swim fast. And second of all, maybe a lot of people don't follow it properly and end up only having good 50 and 100 swimmers. So then, it's a sprint program because all I've got now is sprinters in my pool.
Right. So, I think like, look, when I did it strictly, like I did have a couple kids that swam really well in longer races, right? But it was very hard to keep them doing it properly. And it took a lot of, the other thing I think that's like totally, I probably didn't even mention this in the podcast, so it just couldn't even collect all my thoughts on it. But that I've noticed is USRPT is so demanding on you as a coach because, you've got swimmers stopping like all the time and, you're trying to deliver feedback to them. So it actually demands a lot of coaching resources to make it work.
If you've got, for example, in your squad, if you've got maybe 4 lanes, right?
Yeah. And
you've got up to 6 swimmers in a lane at some times, some club programs, it's like that. Some club programs, it's even more than that. And because every effort is timed. Yeah. Every effort is timed. How can you possibly be given everyone's times and watching for technical feedback?
Well, you can't. That's what I mean is it on paper, it's incredible, but the application of it is where things start to.
We don't coach on paper. We don't race on paper.
That's right. We don't coach robots. Yeah. We we coach human beings and so yes, when you get out there, you do have to come up with something. Did just sort of curious for people if it's now I can also push them toward the Brent Rushall podcast. Did he address some of that on did you guys get into that at all or?
So I asked him, so obviously I was approaching the episode kind of, I don't want to interrogate Brent about.
You never want to interrogate somebody on a podcast, right? Like,
but equally, I didn't want it to be just seeming like a sales pitch for USRPT.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to get a little bit balance.
Right.
So I put the first question I put to him was, there are swimmers training for Tokyo at the moment, right? And do you believe that if they were on a USRPT program, they'd swim much better than if they're on just their normal program.
Yeah.
And this was a bit, I actually didn't know whether to put it in or not, like to take it out, because he goes on to reference like Phelps and how Phelps set all of his fastest times more or less in Beijing.
Yeah.
And in 2012 went slower, and in 16 went slower. And he seemed to allude to the fact that it was the program he was on that was making him slower.
Okay.
And he was saying like
that's quite a claim. I mean, that's a big.
And I thought, you know what, like potentially I want Bob Bowman on this podcast one day. Is this slander? Like, so
is this heresy to put this on there?
Yeah. So I was unsure whether to put it in, but I think sometimes you just got to leave those things in because, Michael Phelps is a famous athlete. Everyone knows about his journey from Beijing to 16 and the ups and downs within that. Okay. And it's very easy for me to see that, well, he had the same coach from 04 to 16, right? He had the same coach all the way through. And clearly that program worked in 04. It worked all the way through to 08, and it continued to work. He continued to be the best in the world at the events that he was swimming. It's not his fault necessarily. He didn't need to break world records to win those events in 16 and 12.
Yeah.
Right. Other people necessarily weren't pushing him that far. But let's not forget, in 16, he was what, 31?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously a 31-year-old man is going to be slower potentially than, I don't know, how old is he in 2008?
And he would have been 23. I mean, if you were at your absolute peak of physical conditioning at 23, it'd be pretty tough.
Well, we know swimming in general, people tend to retire earlier than they do in other sports. So 23 as a swimmer, you're kind of probably at your peak, right?
Right.
Now, I don't want to say it for everyone because, now people are competing later on, but I don't agree with what Brent said about, and if Bob's listening,
Bob's not listening because as you missed the podcast that was after that one where literally we had a whole segment discussing second guessing Bob's decision to redshirt the entire ASU team. And I, with tongue planted firmly in cheek, but I said, I don't want to live in a world where I cannot second guess the coach of the greatest swimmer of all time. So I've made a habit of second guessing Bob's decisions. And if he is listening after that one, because I did address him directly, I do think there is a paradigm here where, look, I used to say this to my boss at Georgia Tech. I'd say because she'd get frustrated. She was a brand new head coach and she'd get frustrated that, people were second guessing all their decisions. I said, but the only reason people get to second guess your decisions is you're the boss. So the higher up you are, when you're the coach of the greatest swimmer of all time, every other coach has a moment where they go, yeah, I could probably do it a little bit better than, he's doing it. I could, if he just did this, they have that moment where they think that to themselves, I think, where they go I could do it better. And so Brent's just vocalizing that thing that I think many people have thought. And the only reason people do that is because Bob has ascended to the highest level of coaching.
Yeah, but I just don't think you can be the coach to the greatest Olympian of all time.
Yeah.
Right. And say that, I don't think you can, as outsiders, I don't think we can say that his methods don't work because clearly they've worked, right?
Right.
Clearly it's achieved the outcome that was set upon. So we, it worked. So we can't say it didn't work.
Yeah.
So then, I think that, and then also I said, one of the questions was, so a lot of the coaches listen to this will coach in club programs with busy lanes.
Yeah.
Have you got any practical tips for applying the model in that environment. And, you know, he didn't go into lots of detail, but he pointed the listeners towards Swimming Science Journal.
Yep.
On that website, where there's like, I think 37 articles that he's written about USRPT, and, you know, some of it's about kind of the more physiological principles, but some of it's about the practical application. So I think the information is out there, but, you know, all the advice in the world won't lead you, I don't think, to be able to run that program. And I think if I'm going to run I've got to be satisfied that I'm doing a good job, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm just timing swimmers and there's no time for technical feedback, I don't think we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So
I don't even coach with a stopwatch anymore. I'm well known for not carrying a stopwatch.
Well, it's funny you say that, right? Because most of my career, I've been working with like real age group swimmers, 9 years old through probably the oldest I've regularly coached, like, has been one of my swimmers. It's been maybe like 14.
Yeah.
And like, I will probably coach 90% of my sessions without even getting my stopwatch out of the bag. If I'm doing technical work, if I'm just doing an aerobic set, doesn't need timing.
They don't need to be timed to the 10th on their,
No, I think the only things I time, only things I time are speed sets, because they all want to know how fast they go in.
Sure.
If we're doing a max effort kick set, because, you know, you want to be going fast when you kick. And maybe if I've done race pace with some of those 13, 14-year-olds, race pace. The other stuff, I've not really timed it because I like to use RPE instead of time. But like, just let them swim and I'll tell them what they can do better.
Yeah.
I think you can get much more out of that, especially with age group swimmers, of telling them what they can do better. A time doesn't really mean anything to a 9-year-old. Oh, you just went 3:30 for 200 freestyle. Okay.
All right. I have one more race pace question because I just can't even help myself. And then I got to get to the lightning round with you here at the end. Actually, sorry, two questions. First one is you mentioned Bob Bowman. Are there, like, he's somebody that's out there you still really want to have on the podcast? What are some other people that you're like dream guests for the Poolside Pass that you haven't gotten yet?
Yeah, great question. So I'd still like to get Greg Troy and Dave Durden. So if they're listening, I'll be in touch.
We might get Greg Troy to listen to this. So we'll see.
Yeah, if Greg's listening, I'll be in touch. Obviously Bob. And then I think, I don't know how to pronounce properly his first name. Arilison Silva.
Oh, I don't know either. I think it's Arilson.
Arilson Silva. I think he's Brazilian, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have him on the show. I know Brett Hawke has got a fantastic podcast, but himself is a fantastic coach, so he'd be interesting to speak to. But I think, I've done, especially this last year or so, I've spoken to lots of people that have coached Olympians and Olympic medalists. I think maybe Series 4 and Series 5, I'll try and throw in a few more age group coaches into the mix, because a lot of the people that listen don't coach Olympic medalists.
Yes.
A lot of the people that listen,
probably 99%.
Coach age group swimmers, right?
Yeah.
So maybe something a little bit more relevant to what we actually do, because it's great to hear about, how Eddie Reese coached Aaron Pearsall and how, Teri McKeever coached all her Olympians and all that stuff. But sometimes the best tips are, how can we coach age groupers better? Because there are no Aaron Pearsalls, Ryan Lochte's, Phelps, if we don't have good age group swimmers.
Right.
So I think
and good age group coaches
to doing that a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question on race pace then I want to ask you is, because I remember all the way back to your university education. I mean, do you think that the physiology, like the science there, is sound? When you read it, when you read the free resources, you're like, okay, this makes sense, or do you pick it apart a little bit?
I think like right now, high intensity interval training, HIIT training,
Yeah.
There's a clear link between that and improved cardiovascular fitness.
Yeah.
Right. So I think some of the science is good. I don't feel like a lot of the USRPT research, though, is peer reviewed.
Yeah, nobody. It's Brent in a vacuum doing a lot of this.
References a lot of his own work all the time, and you know what? That's fine.
It's not his fault that nobody else is.
Yeah, if no one else is doing the research, you've got to do the research.
Yeah,
but submit it to get peer reviewed at a journal. Yeah, because then they'll tell you if your science is good.
Yeah.
Now he's got he's got PhDs, he's a doctorate, so clearly he's a good scientist, right? But yeah, I think swimming is there's too much going on in swimming.
Yeah.
I think and like you say, like with USRPT, these athletes got to come in every day and swim fast every day. Every day they've got to swim fast. And is that necessary? I think USRPT relies a lot on the neuroscience development of the athlete.
Yeah.
Rather than the physiological development of the athlete.
Okay.
If you're really trying to force an anaerobic adaptation within an athlete, and this is, we had a guest on, Rob Greenwood. Mm-hmm. He uses the Jan Olbrecht model of training. He said race pace for some swimmers isn't really that fast. Yeah.
Right.
And, if you really want to force and really stress some of those anaerobic systems, you've got to swim faster than race pace.
Yeah.
So, and I think, look, there are multiple models. You've got USRPT, you've got the Albrecht model, you've got Trafine, you've got, obviously Bill Sweetnam, big model, loads of different ways of coaching.
John Urbanchek's thing is really popular.
I love the color coding. So what I've tried to do with my coaching is take a little bit of Albrecht stuff and a little bit of Urbanchek's color coding stuff and try and mash them together.
Pretty popular.
So, yeah. But yeah, I'm still not convinced with the whole USRPT thing, but I'm not the font of all knowledge. I've just heard a few people talk. So, I'm no more qualified to speak about USRPT than anyone else is. But everyone's entitled to an opinion, I guess. And personally, from what I've heard, what I've read, I just wouldn't be confident that it could deliver better sustained results than programs that otherwise you can run.
So I want to finish, as I said, I want to finish with this lightning round. I ask, 5 questions and you got to just react and come up with something I do with everybody that comes on the podcast. It's a nice way to finish. And I've already trapped you into the first question. Sneakily here just 5 minutes ago. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 1. Bob Bowman and Greg Troy say they're willing to record a podcast with you, but not if you record a podcast with the other one. Who do you say yes to?
Oh, wow. This is difficult because Bob coached the greatest Olympian of all time.
Yep.
And Greg coaches the best swimmer in the world right now.
Right.
Oh, man. This is tough.
I put this one in just to spoil your future podcasts.
Yeah. Because if they both listen, then one of them,
go.
I'll never get one of them now. I think I'm going to have to go with Greg, right? Because, Caleb is he's a fantastic athlete as well as a fantastic swimmer. And, I just want to find out how he can tuck jump so high. So, that's a burning question for me. So
seriously,
Yeah, Greg. Just to find out how high Caleb can really tuck jump.
I need a YouTube supercut of Caleb Dressel tuck jumps and like a breakdown, and somebody needs to say like,
I've got a slow motion one I can send to you.
okay, well see, you got everything I need. You referenced earlier that comment that Rushall made. What is probably the number one moment that's made it past the editing process for you where you've gone, am I going to regret including that on the podcast?
Yeah, it's probably that. Because, like, you don't want to upset.
Yeah.
Now, in the UK, we always say that in America, people are always lawyered up, like big time lawyered up. If someone's going to sue you for crossing the street in the wrong way, like, so I don't want to piss off. Can I say that? Sorry.
Yeah, you can say piss off. Yeah, I think you can say that.
I don't want to annoy Bob Bowman, and I certainly don't want to get sued because I can't afford to be sued.
Right. I have a great story about that dynamic. When I was living in Denmark, one of the things I loved about living there was you got to travel all around Europe and make easy trips. And my daughter was 9 months old, and we met my in-laws in London. And I'm going to try not to swear when I told this story because the person that yelled at us, of course, sweared. But we were by the Tower of London, and we were waiting to cross at a stoplight, and there was no cars coming, and some guy just started walking across the street, and my father-in-law turned to me and he said, "We're not going to go. I don't want to jaywalk." And the guy turned around and he just yelled at us. He said, "There's no effing jaywalking in England."
Yeah. So during lockdowns, right, everyone seems to be now fantastic hikers. Everyone's going out for a walk, right? Yeah. And me and my girlfriend were out walking the other day because I've not really been to the US, only to Seattle because my dad works for Boeing. So I've been to Seattle. He was out there for work for a long time, so we went out to visit him. I've only been to Seattle for like 5 days. Sure. But my girlfriend's been to like New York City a few times with like university courses and all that kind of stuff. And we were just crossing the road, like just there was no lights, there was no zebra crossing. We call it a zebra crossing. You might call it a crosswalk. I don't know. Yeah, like no zebra crossing, and we just crossed the road. And afterwards, she goes, "Isn't it strange that that's illegal in America?" Right. And I was like, "Yeah, well, you know what? We live in crazy times because right now it's illegal for me to go and see my nan." So,
but crossing the road whenever you feel like it, that's loud. Okay, we got a little derailed. 3. Special English question. Is cold beer good?
Okay, so I am now going to become public enemy number 1 in the UK, especially amongst the swimming coach fraternity. I don't like beer.
That's okay.
I'm a cider guy, but cold beer is definitely, I can imagine, better than warm beer because my one experience of beer was warm, and that's why I don't drink beer. So cold beer surely has got to be better than warm beer.
You're really going to be out now. That's you see how all these questions are a trap, really. If you were a coach of young Jamie Fowler, how would you describe yourself as a swimmer?
Not very good. No, I was okay. I think probably not talented, but like wanting to be better.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was always keen. I always loved being in the water, but I wasn't fantastic. I was a hard worker, but I wasn't fantastic.
Yeah,
I think I was good technically, and I worked hard.
Okay,
but I just had a ceiling, I guess, and it wasn't very high.
I think I would have described young Chris DeSantis, I've told people this many times, as a total blockhead. Just won't listen. I have a theory in coaching that you get whatever it was that you were really annoying as a swimmer, is that you get it back as a coach. So like the number one most frustrating thing for me as a coach is when swimmers don't listen to me. But that's who I was. I was that guy who like was listen. You know, like I listened. I mean, I heard what the coach was saying, but I just went, he's not right. I'll just do my own thing here. You know, like I'll just go my own way. Finally, I know this is another sensitive English swimming question. Are we sure Adam Peaty is human?
He's got 2 arms and 2 legs and a head like the rest of us, so we can assume so.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I just look at him sometimes and I'm like, is that guy the same species as the rest of the people?
I think we think that about Caleb Dressel.
Yeah.
But again, 2 arms, 2 legs and a head like the rest of us, right?
Yeah.
Both fantastic athletes. And, you know, I actually spoke to Mel for the podcast, Mel Marshall, who coaches Adam.
Yeah.
And she mentions his technical presence. I think she called it technical presence. It's just, he looks big when he swims. And I just think he's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And he's doing so much right now in the UK with trying to keep the young swimmers that are locked out of the pools at the minute. He's doing so much trying to keep them engaged. So I think obviously he's a fantastic athlete and a fantastic swimmer, but I think he's also, a good person and wants people to do well.
Yeah, he's been willing to take a stand on a lot of stuff. I mean, he's taken some pro swimming stuff, on some stuff within the country, as you reference. Where are you guys? I'm sorry, now I'm adding a 6th bonus question. Then I promise I'll let you go. Where are you guys on Boris Johnson's roadmap? When do the pools reopen? Are you included in that?
12th of April.
Okay.
If everything goes to plan. We'll find out 2 weeks before.
I think those are not comforting. If everything goes to plan is not a comforting phrase in the time of COVID, right?
No, I think like the first time we came out of lockdown, they opened the pubs before the pools, and everyone was just incensed by it, right?
Sure,
because it doesn't make sense at all.
No.
So the first time I was angry because I'd had 5 months off deck and I couldn't fathom why it wasn't safe for people to go and swim in a tub of disinfectant.
Yeah.
Right. The second time, because we were locked down again in November for a month.
Right.
I was like, well, he said it was only a month and it's only a month, so it's okay. And then we went into this next lockdown. And honestly, now, if he said we're coming back in tomorrow, it'd been great. If he said 12th of April, great. If he said 17th of May, I would have taken anything, just any date to get back in the water because I just want to know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, stay strong over there. You seem like you still are maintaining a pretty positive attitude. I think that speaks a lot. Thanks so much for coming on and answering all my questions and stepping into all of my traps. I really appreciate it.
I guess I'm quite naive. You know, I'm used to interviewing, not being interviewed. So I'm not great media trained. I think a more well-managed person might have said no comment a few times today.
You'll have the chance to turn the tables on me again. Now I'm remembering one more thing. If people like, part of the reason why we did this is I've been listening to Poolside Pass, and I just think like, if you listen to my podcast, you should absolutely listen to the Poolside Pass. It's great. It's got, as you've heard on this podcast, it's got great guests. I mean, you know, you get for free, you get like a clinic's worth of information from some of these coaches. I can't believe they're giving it away for free, but they are. And so tell people how they can follow everything. Yeah, go ahead.
So Brent Rushall's credit, he said he would only come on the podcast if people could listen to it for free. So he does want all his stuff to be available to anyone who wants it. So, fair play to Brent. He's not trying to monetize his stuff. So, fair play to Brent. He believes in free coach education, which is what I believe in.
Yeah.
So I guess the question was, where can people find us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can they follow all your